else to come along and say, hey, I notice, that you're good at this, or you're good at that, or maybe you should try, this or that. So, of course, a higher power knows what is within us, and that's, God knows what's in us. And so sometimes God sends other persons into our lives to help us to discover what that is. And so it takes someone to give birth. And I like the midwife terminology, because a midwife helps a woman to give birth. And so the same thing would be true for all of us here on earth, that it takes other people to walk alongside us to help us to refine, to fine-tune whatever it is that we're purposed to be. And so today I'm a pretty decent teacher, but when I first started, of course I wasn't. So we all start at one place, but just because I've been in the presence of people and people have nurtured me and molded me, it has given me an opportunity to shift.
Now, what type of target market of individuals would benefit from the Birthing Your Vision that you have coming up on September the 14th, is it?
Yes. So Birthing Your Vision, the purpose of that is to help people to overcome self-defeating habits. And so a lot of times we have a vision, but we don't move toward it for various reasons. And some of those I mentioned earlier, in terms of the domestic violence that people may face, substance abuse, unhealthy relationships, poor self-esteem. And so one of the things that Birthing Your Vision helps you to do is to get healthy, which is what the Seeds of Wealth and Wellness is about. It's about getting healthy. We want your mind to be healthy. We want you to be physically healthy. We want you to be emotionally healthy, because when we are blessed with financial blessings, with people in our lives, we want to be able to fully embrace the gifts that we have.
I'm thinking, I'm a businessman and I got an idea. How would I birth that vision with the principles that you just shared with our viewers?
Well, first is identifying, what you would call SWOT, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So that's one of the things that we would do. We develop a realistic plan, so establishing some goals and objectives in terms of what it is that you want to do, a mission statement, a vision statement. The importance of having a network, that is really important to the success of anything. So if I don't have a mission, and even if you're not going into business, just your personal life, you should have a mission and a vision for your personal life, because if you don't know where you're going, you are going to end up anywhere. And you're going to look around one day and you're going to be asking the question like, how did I get here? A lot of us ask that question, how did I get here? I don't know how I got here, because we just go with every wind of doctrine, every wind, whatever wind blows, whatever people are doing, we just jump on the bandwagon with the next fad that comes along, versus everything that is out there is not for me.
Now, tell me, Professor Goodman, tell me a little bit about your credentials and the schools you've been to. I was pretty amazed when, as I was reading your bio, I was reading that you had achieved 3 master's degrees, and you had spent some time as project manager at one of the local facilities out here, and that's pretty amazing. And
they call it being an overachiever.
Yes. Well,
going from a person who grew up on public assistance to dropping out of high school. And let me just say, I have a daughter, Cherie Jones. She's married to a wonderful guy named Earl Jones, and they have 2 children. And that is my pride and joy. My daughter, Cherie, is my pride and joy. So I don't consider that a mistake at all that I had her at 17. But going from dropping out to achieving these 3 degrees, which that was never my goal. It just wasn't my goal. It was my goal to go to seminary to learn more about God. That's what I went for. And when I got there, education opens up a world that I probably wouldn't get anywhere else. And so as a result of being at Virginia Union, that just opened the door up to chaplaincy, and that opened the door up to rehab counseling. And
So wait a second now. I know you're a professor at the college, at J. Sarge, and you're teaching a curriculum in group dynamics, but you're pastoring a church too?
I do pastor a church. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Now, I was also, what else I was amazed with, that you were doing or offering a 12-step program to the community. Is that accurate?
Yes, I was. And that's a resource for persons affected by substance abuse, gambling, whatever issues you may have. So we do that group from a biblical perspective.
You're saying
And
that's a behavior modification
It
program?
is a behavior modification program. And so, I want to just acknowledge you as well, because you've been very instrumental in the lives of many people in the Richmond area in terms of helping people to see their value, one. And so, last week I said this, Michael is the greatest motivator of the 21st century. He can motivate a mosquito, trust me, everybody knows this. He just speaks life into every situation. But coming to the Seed Institute, can you tell us what that is?
The mission statement for the Seed Institute is to effectively help individuals, just like birthing your vision, take an idea or a concept, and without procrastination, being able to move it forward. In business, the first thing we're going to do is develop a business plan or strategic plan, Professor Goodman. After that process, and then we're going to get the corporate documentation, whether it's a limited liability company, an S corporation, or a C corporation, or a 501c3, or a nonprofit corporation or non-stock corporation. And then from there, we want to immediately be able to assist them in executing their plan. Most people, just like birthing your vision, that's why we have so much in common, are going to procrastinate for years and years. And as they said in one of the books that I read, Robert Kiyosaki, before you quit your job, they wait for all the lights to turn green before they actually get stop it. But this is a great time now to bring our guest on. This is a perfect time to bring our guest on, Professor Goodman.
We're going to go to a break. Okay.
Yes, and so let's get ready to go to a break. We want to bring our incredible guest on, because talking about me and talking about Pastor Melvina, the goal is birthing the vision and domestic violence prevention. Hang on for 1 second as we go to a break. Hi, I'm Mike Edwards, and this is my host, Melvina Goodman, and welcome to the Seeds of Wealth and Wellness. We have a special guest on board, Carol Adams, who is an incredible young lady and taking on a very large initiative, a little lady with a big bang. And with that being the case, we talked about domestic violence, and we want to talk about the definition of domestic violence first. Everybody, unless they're in denial, are affected by domestic violence. And without further ado, Melvina, I want you to introduce our guest.
This is actually a great pleasure. I met Carol Adams, I like to call her Sergeant Carol Adams, about 2 years ago at a walk for recovery, and you invited me to participate in a domestic violence walk that you were doing at Byrd Park. That was in 2011. And since then, we've kind of kept running, crossing paths, and working on this domestic violence initiative. And I am honored and privileged to be in your presence because there's not many people that would take on this big task of domestic violence. And I also want to say to the audience, as well as to church leaders, organization heads, that we can partner with the Richmond Police Department and Carol Adams to address this giant in the land called domestic violence. And so, without further ado, we want to invite you to share your story, because you have an awesome story of how your life was impacted by domestic violence.
Thank you, Melvina, for that wonderful introduction. My domestic violence is important to me because it's been a significant part of my life since I was an elementary school student. And I can remember I used to go to school at George Washington Carver, and that's when I was in grade school. And it was ever so often that my dad would come home. He'd be intoxicated, and he would have lots of bad verbiage towards my mother. And it would sometimes escalate to the physical piece, where he would put his hands on her, and this continued on throughout my childhood, from elementary school to middle school and then to high school. And when I got to high school, it escalated more to be more physical. The verbal abuse continued, but it was always followed by physical abuse, because at that time there were no laws in place that dictated what the police shall do, and the police would just respond. And it was the old verbiage: go cool down, Mr. Adams, and come back in a couple of hours and everything would be okay. And as a child, I would call the police, but there was little that they could do, or they were directed by the law to do at that time. And it was when I was a senior in high school, and I had made my plans where I was going to leave Virginia and never ever come back again. I had, made all my notes. I was going to join the Air Force. I was going to fly airplanes, and I was never coming back to Virginia again, only to communicate with my grandmother, who was like my role model. But it was December of 1980, December the 30th of 1980. One morning I woke up as this average happy-go-lucky high school student that had began to cope with living with domestic violence, but had a plan for the 6 months where I had left in my household, where I would be out and I wouldn't have to live through it anymore. Where I woke up and family was fine. I went off to work, came home that afternoon. Before I came home, I had visited my aunt that lived in Jackson Ward, and she gave me my mother's Christmas present because they had missed their exchange during the holiday. And so I brought the Christmas present home, and my mom, my dad, and my sister were there. And I gave my mom her gift. And so this day was unusual because she was getting dressed to go out with her girlfriends. And that was unusual because she wasn't allowed to go out with her girlfriends. Wow. So that alerted me, to pay more attention to him and his behaviors. And it was just, different because he wasn't becoming, starting an argument to deter her from going. So she got dressed and she went out with her friends. And this was just a different turn of events because, before it would have been, lots of, excuse my French, hell raising, why you gotta go and that kind of thing, the controlling piece. And so she went out with her friends and I went out with a friend of mine for a while. And I came home and my house was completely quiet, no noise, no sounds. And I walked up the stairs, and as I sat down to take my shoes off, all I heard was pow, 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 pow. Wow. In the next room. And so I got up, I went to the phone and I called 911 and I told the dispatcher that my father had shot my mother. And of course they wanted to know, did I see it? Where was he? And I told them, no, I didn't see it, but over the years he had threatened to kill her so many times.